This recording will cover Chapter 3 in your textbook, the special education process in middle and secondary schools. And again, you will learn more about this process in 759. So this is kind of just the brief overview. So we talked about this at the end of Chapter 2. You know, a student is referred for uh, testing and evaluation to determine if they have a disability that qualifies them for an IEP. So you would go through the referral stages, then the evaluation, IEP planning, and transition planning. Some of the students you're going to work with in high schools already have been through all this, right? They might already have an IEP. Some students you find, you might come across might not have been through this process because people at the earlier grade levels might have said, oh, we'll just pass them on to the next person. Oh, we'll just keep passing them on, right? So you may end up going through this process, where someone might refer a student to you. Then you would be responsible for coordinating the evaluation. Usually there's a school psychologist involved. You would probably do some observations, some other stuff. And then if the student does have a disability under one of the IDEA categories, you would look at the IEP planning and transition planning. So the referral really can be made by anyone. It could be made by a teacher, could be made by a parent. It could even really, at secondary, it could be made by the student themselves. So it could be made by a number of people for a number of different reasons, and that would result in a formal review of a student's performance, okay? So some behaviors suggesting low referral, low achievement. Again, you have a 10th grader who's reading and performing and achieving on a second grade level. That might be something worth looking into. The student might have some social skills deficit, right? They might really struggle with interacting with their peers. They might be overly active. Girls tend to be overly internally emotional. I think I talked about that maybe in chapter 1. So that might be something to look out for also. Is there a student who's really withdrawn, really quiet, doesn't interact with others? So not the overly active, but kind of the opposite. There might be some speech language deficits, some health issues, or of course some behavior problems, especially at the second grade level or secondary level. Typically there is a committee. It's different at each school. So when you are even for 719, you could ask the school, ask the special ed teacher with whom you're working, oh, what's the referral process like here? Just kind of informally see what they have to say about the referral process. Usually the team or the committee will determine if further assessment or evaluation is necessary, could result in a formal assessment, or people could just say, oh, let's try this modification or this accommodation or no action at all. And if there is a decision to evaluate, the evaluation must occur with parental consent. You really want to make sure the parents are involved in this whole entire process because you would hate to go through the whole process and somehow test a student without parental consent and then say, hey, guess what? Your student qualified as having a learning disability. We would like to provide them with special education services. And the parent might say, no thanks, I'm good. I didn't even know this was happening. So make sure the parents are involved. Okay, there's also something now called response to intervention, which is RTI, or MTSS, multi-tiered systems of support. You might want to ask about that too when you're out at your placements, just to kind of get a feel for what's going on in the schools. So this is really an option for identifying learning disabilities, and it's basically an attempt to kind of catch students, before we have to refer them for special education. So you really want to look at, okay, what as a teacher, what am I doing? And what is the student responding to? What interventions is the student responding to? Or what are they failing to respond to? That's kind of how I think of it. What are they failing to respond to? Okay, so you want to try to we want to make sure we're only referring students for special education that really truly need it. Okay, so just kind of keep that in mind. So then if it gets to the assessment phase, that's the purpose is to determine eligibility, again, for special education, and also the needs of that particular student. We want to make sure we're using criterion reference, norm reference, non-discriminatory assessments, all of those components. Okay, teacher's role in assessment, again, you probably will not be the one doing the actual assessment. That's usually a school psychologist. We do not train you to do some of these things. Again, that's usually a school psychologist, but you might be asked to collect some information, collect some data, participate in conferences and decisions, understand what the assessment means and how, or the assessment and information, and how can you relay that information to the parents? Because sometimes the school psychologists tend to speak in very, school psychology terminology, whereas some parents might not understand some of that terminology. So you want to think about, okay, how can I put this in parent friendly? And that's no fault of the parents, you know what I mean? But it's not common language, right? Not everybody knows what a Welchler Intelligent Scale Test is, right? I don't even know if I said that right. So it's been a while since I've been on a team. And then you also want to monitor the progress of the students. So again, the assessment, this can help determine if the student is eligible for special education. This will also look at the specific needs of the students, and it will help you determine progress towards goals and objectives. And again, we will look a lot more at the IEP process in Education 759. If you have not had it yet, you will probably in the spring. Don't quote me on that. But some of you may have already had it probably last spring. So the membership on the IEP team, or again, some places call it committee, although it's really not, it's a team. The parents or caregivers, it should say, of the child, gen ed classroom teacher, assessment professional, which is typically a school psychologist, representative of the LEA, which is typically the principal, or someone who can kind of commit resources from, the district or the school to that particular student if they do qualify. Well, they've already qualified. So to commit, if the team says, Bobby needs a one-to-one assistant all day long, blah, blah, blah. Well, somebody has to pay for that, right? So that's where the representative of the LEA would come in. Special education teacher, others as appropriate, maybe a speech language pathologist, occupational therapist, stuff like that. And the child when appropriate. Typically, I would say about age 13, 14 at the latest, getting them involved. And in 759, I think I have a clip that I'll show you of a student who was not involved, and the team just, made the decisions for him. And he was like, no, that's not what I'm interested in. See you later, right? Why are we going to decide the future, especially of our older students? Why are we going to decide their future when they might not be interested in what we think they should be doing, right? So I would say involve the child as early as appropriate. IEP components, present level functioning. So kind of where are they now? Measurable annual goals. How are we going to determine if they are making progress? A little hint, a measurable annual goal is not simply Bobby will improve his reading skills. Not measurable. Okay. How will progress be evaluated, and how will that progress be shared with the parents, the caregivers? What special education services will be provided? Is there any time when the child is not with non-disabled peers? Accommodations for testing and dates of services. And again, we will get way more into this in 759. This is just a brief one chapter overview of the IEP process, whereas in 759 we have a whole textbook about it. But ask, you can ask when you're out in your placements for 719, ask your CT about the IEP process and the referral process and stuff like that, just so you can get a more accurate representation of what's going on out in the schools. So current functioning, again, is determined with assessments. Measurable goals are established based on those current functioning levels. Okay, where are we now, and what are our measurable goals that will get them to this, next level? That's what's going to drive your interventions. Okay, the annual goals must be specific, measurable, attainable, routines-based, and tied to a functional priority. So if you have a student in 10th grade reading at a second grade level, are you going to say in 1 year the student is going to be able to read at a 10th grade level? No, right? There's no way that's going to happen. The student is going to make progress. Absolutely. We hope so, right? But there's no way they can attain going from a second grade level to a 10th grade level. Okay. So that's what that means. Be realistic with your goals. Okay. We want them to make progress, and we want to shoot for the moon. Of course we do, but within reason, right? So kind of the moon with an asterisk. So behavior intervention planning, this is for students with severe behavior problems, that I think we talked about this when we were talking about emotional behavioral disabilities. When is it just a once in a while or one off kind of behavior, and when is it more consistent? When is it becoming a real problem? So this would be developed as part of an IEP. You would develop or conduct a functional behavioral assessment. Again, we'll get more into that. Transition plan, this is old. So this textbook was 2012 and it says mandated beginning with age 16. South Carolina, I believe, is age 13. So we want to think about that, okay? When they're 13, which again, you might have that student 8th grade, 9th grade, something, 10th grade. I don't know when they're 13, 8th grade, right? You want to think about that, earlier than 16. And you want to think about measurable post-secondary goals, transition services, and plan to transition the majority of rights from the parents to the student. Again, we'll get a lot more into that if you in some of your other classes. Some challenges for IEP teams. Well, you don't want to be vague with your goals. You need to be really specific, and you need to, as I said a minute ago, you need to be realistic, and you need to think about, you need to conduct some action planning to figure out how you're going to actually help the student achieve this goal. Are you, as a special ed teacher, going to be the one, delivering all the instruction? Are they going to have some time in gen ed classes, right? You really need to think about how they're going to achieve their goals. And then also transferring rights again from the parents to the student, once they're 18 or 21 or whatever it is. Some parents might not want to give those up. So many, even though it's mandated, a lot of parents and a lot of our students are uninvolved in the IEP participation. We really want them to be involved at this grade level, right? Both parents and students. We need them to be involved so they can help plan for what is my child going to do once they leave high school. So, some of you I know are working in high schools, you're part of the transition team, you're part of this, part of that. If you have ways and strategies to increase parental involvement, please feel free to share it with us. You can start a discussion board thread, whatever you want. But I know some of you are out there and have some of these strategies. Please share them with us. Student involvement. Again, why are we going to plan their future for them? They need to be involved. And ultimately, we want our students or your students to lead the IEP team meetings. We want them to say, okay, this meeting's about me. Here are my strengths. Here are where I think I want to go. No, I don't want to go to four-year college and get a degree in math. I want to go to a culinary art school and learn how to be a sous chef or something like that. Okay, we want, we don't decide the lives of our typical 18-year-olds, right? Why are we going to do that for students with disabilities? We really want them to advocate for themselves. We want them to be involved. We want them to say, no, I don't want to do that. I want to do this. Help me get there. Okay. Whew, got a little bit on a soapbox right there. Okay, teachers' role in the IEP process. Gen ed teachers, especially at secondary, they're playing an increasing role because, as we talked about, a lot more students are now included in gen ed classrooms. So gen ed teachers are mandated to be a part of the IEP process, as are, of course, special ed teachers. Teachers need to understand the process, components of the IEP, and really, we always want to make sure we're focusing on student strengths, okay? As you'll see in 759, we talk about student needs also. I like to kind of say students, room for improvement. So that's just me. Least restrictive environment. I talked about this a little bit in chapter 2. Again, to the maximum extent appropriate for that particular child. There's a continuum of placement options that go from more restrictive to least restrictive, and we want to make sure we're looking at the needs of that particular student. Okay, that should dictate the placement, not one size fits all. Due process rights, these are the legal rights of students and parents. Prior to IDEA, they didn't have very many rights, right? So that's why students tended to be, oh, you can't come to school anymore, or oh, you have to go to the separate school and be segregated from your peers, because there weren't any rights. Parents were not invited to participate. So now we really want to make sure that we're adhering to the rights of the parents and the students, and that we're giving them a copy of their rights so they know what's going on. Okay, due process rights. Hold on, I skipped a page. Examine records, independent evaluation. So this is kind of if the parents and the school don't really agree on things, there's a whole due process process that needs to be followed. Role of teachers. Okay, I've not much time and 2 slides left. All teachers really must work together. Gen ed, special ed, collaboration must be the focus, and the benefits for the student, or excuse me, the student's needs must be the focus. The multi-tier model of support is evolving. Multi-tier model of education, all students are educated together, increasing diversity, and co-teaching and collaboration are critical. We want to continue to blur those differences between regular and special education and not just have, oh, regular ed over here, special ed over here. Okay, that concludes chapter 3. I'll be back for chapter 4.